In fact, every time we actually do more than one thing at once, quote unquote, we're actually doing micro task switching in our mind. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Known Disciple Project podcast. I'm your host, Mark Hummel. And on this podcast, we talk about personal growth that leads to spiritual development, practical takeaways that you can use in your life as a seriously growth minded disciple of Jesus. Today, we're going to be talking about something that I believe is universal and does so much damage to our potential growth as a Christian and as a person. And that is the topic of having no time, no energy, and no way to actually pour ourselves into our development and our growth. And trust me when I say I get it. I'm just like you, and I've had some really tough periods where I've said the same things that you have probably said. I want to spend more time with Jesus. I want to read my Bible. I want to listen to podcasts, grow myself, surround myself with the right people. And at the end of the day, I'm just so mentally taxed, physically tired, emotionally drained, and just chronically distracted. And there has to be a better way. If that sounds like something useful to you, stick around. We have a lot to get to today. One of my favorite topics, which is taking back your mental bandwidth, your time, and your energy so that you can spend it on things that matter most. Don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel and share with a friend. That's the only way we'll grow this following and help more disciples of Jesus grow themselves and grow spiritually. So, with that said, we're going to have three segments today. The first one is installing high performance tactics into your day so that you don't have that mental and physical drain quite as much. You get back time, energy, and freedom. The second point we're going to make is that you need a simple framework for replenishing or refilling your energy. And it might surprise you how we're going to do that. And then the third is going to be having a system for making spiritual disciplines easier to start, easier to maintain, and hard to skip. Stick with me. Let's dive in. In Matthew 5, you go through the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers. And one of them that has always stuck out to me is blessed are those who do hunger and thirst for righteousness. And I've always sort of wondered what that meant. I've done tons of study on it really even in just the past year and learned and grown quite a bit. But have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt like you've just hungered and thirsted for more? Whether it's knowledge, whether it's energy, whether it is connection, whether it is even God just making his presence known in your life. Hungering and thirsting is such an incredible visual for how we're designed. When we are truly focused on something, truly want something, it's like there's a hunger that only will be satisfied by achieving that one thing. So I believe that God has designed in us a hunger and a thirst for him, and also a hunger and a thirst for development, to grow ourselves, to become a great version of ourselves, something that we can be proud of and aim at Him as we focus on Him. For me personally, what this has looked like over the years is almost like a bull in a china shop, running around just grabbing everything I can: books, podcasts, pastors, business people, coaches, mentors, anything I can to just grow myself. But here's the thing: I'm a pretty busy guy. I have a lot of projects going on, and that's always been the case. So, oftentimes, what would happen is I would actually have courses I bought, stacks of books. If you're watching the podcast, you can see some of my books behind me on the bookshelf. I would have people who offered to pour into me. I'd have mastermind groups and coaching and all these things going on. And at the end of the day, I start rebelling against it. Even going to church, like learning new things, I just couldn't fit a new thing into my head because I was so busy, so mentally drained, and so distracted all the time that I ended up becoming what we call a content zombie. I learned that word from a mastermind group that I was in. Somebody said, "Don't be a content zombie." And I thought, what the heck is a content zombie? And I got them to explain. I asked a question, they answered. They said, Mark, a content zombie is somebody who's just always consuming information, consuming because they have this hunger and this thirst for growth. But when you look at their life day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year, their life is the exact same. They're experiencing the same problems. They're going through the same trials, the same temptations. They're not evolving. And so, kind of like a content zombie, kind of like a zombie, they eat and they consume, but they're dead. They never grow. They never do anything with what they're learning. Well, man, I went through my content zombie period. And as soon as I heard that, it was like a light bulb went off in my mind is that the amount of things that we consume are completely irrelevant to what we do with those things. And so I ended up completely wiping the board and starting over, and now, instead of just grasping for anything that will grow me, I stick to just three topics for an entire year at a time, whether it's CEO development, developing my coaching skills, or diving deeper into a spiritual topic like the historicity of the Gospels or something like that. I try to keep my growth narrow so that I can go deep rather than just grasping everything, which again was exhausting, led to me being a content zombie. And ultimately, I was just unfocused, is what that was. So for today, for you, what I'd love to do is give you some practical things that you can do to focus your growth. But before we do that, we've got to take back some of our time and bandwidth so that if you're a busy person like me, you're not stuck feeling this hunger and this thirst and have no mental time or physical time or energy to actually develop yourself and focus on your growth. Let's get into point number one, which is reclaiming your capacity with intentional high performance strategies and tactics. I'm actually going to go through these pretty quickly, one by one, and then I want to encourage you to execute. Take these ideas and go use them. And then, if you want to develop your skill around them, you can look up some additional trainings or just Google them and learn more about each of these things. But for the sake of time on this podcast, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of these high performer strategies and tactics to get back time and bandwidth. Let's get into number one and just go through the list. So I just love talking about these on the heels of Ecclesiastes 3:1, which is that there's a time for everything. There's a time to exert energy. There's a time to rest. There's a time to refuel. And these strategies can help you do all of those things. So here's the pain point we're addressing with these strategies. It's the mental fatigue that we experience because of all of the things, the cognitive load, we would say, of your day, all of the decisions you make, all of the things you're thinking about, all of the work you're doing, the relationships you're maintaining, they mentally drain you. And these are just some practical things we can put in place to make sure that we're protecting our mental bandwidth. Okay. So that way, when it comes time to grow ourselves or to get up early and have a quiet time, we actually have some mental reserves. Number one is task switching. If you take a look at your day, chances are you're doing a lot of multitasking, you're switching from one task to another frequently throughout the day. And it turns out that, in fact, the research is very clear on this at this point, that multitasking is a myth. In fact, every time we actually do more than one thing at once, quote unquote, we're actually doing micro task switching in our mind. And every time we switch tasks, we're using mental energy to try to ramp up production for one thing and sort of leave the other thing behind. And so I'm making this very simplified, but think about it like this: you cannot actually do two things at once. Multitasking is not a thing. Your brain doesn't work that way. And so we want to eliminate as much task switching as possible in our day because that causes us to burn more energy, and it causes us to have less mental energy throughout the day. So, things you can do to eliminate task switching throughout the day or multitasking or doing multiple things at once, as we think we're doing, is point number two, three, and four. So, point number two here is time blocking. Now, you probably have heard of this before. The truth is, it's a very simple concept. It's very difficult to pull off, especially if you're not in control of your own schedule at work or maybe even at home. So, time blocking is where you're going to use a calendar and you're actually going to put on your calendar blocks of time that are specific for a task or a set of tasks. For example, at 5 o'clock in the morning for me, it says quiet time. So I get up at 5, I have a cup of coffee, and within that quiet time, I have a very specific set of tasks. I stick to those. I do not switch off of them until I am done. If you look at my calendar for the workday, it's very similar. I have time blocks that are meant to keep me focused or in flow, as we would say, on very specific things at very specific periods of the day. So time blocking can help you eliminate task switching because you're telling yourself, I'm only going to focus on these things within this time block. And it's a really great strategy for protecting your energy and your bandwidth. It also helps you organize your life if you do point number three, which is time batching. So think about how often you switch back and forth between different types of activities and how jarring it is to go between things that are very different. For example, in my past, I ran a particular team that was selling health coaching. And we had these people selling packages of health coaching 1 minute and then actually doing the health coaching the next, two very different skill sets. And as we studied production in this business, what we found is that sales were down and coaching quality was down because we had them switching mindsets or switching tasks between two very different things throughout the day. We eliminated that. The coaching quality went up and our sales went up. So we want to keep ourselves doing like tasks within a time block. So we can utilize time blocking and time batching to eliminate task switching, which causes mental fatigue throughout the day. If you were to just do those three things, you would already begin to get back some really large amounts of mental energy. Okay. That energy is going to be used for your development, your growth, your quiet times, and pouring yourself into your development. All right. So, point number four in this section is transition with purpose. Going between those time blocks has to be done purposefully. Now, I've had plenty of times in my life, and it still occurs at times where I go from one meeting to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next without any break. And that is incredibly damaging to your energy levels. So, what we say is transition on purpose to the degree that you can as you're going from one task or time block to the next, give yourself a short little mental break to download what you just got through and to prepare yourself for the next thing. Now, what this does is it actually causes you to be in a more peaceful state, causes you to be more contemplative of your day, and it actually makes your day feel more productive and longer rather than the day that just flew by. And before you know it, you're home and you're tired and you have no mental bandwidth or energy. The really good trick for getting back time and energy in your day is to transition on purpose. I know how counterintuitive that sounds because you're adding something to do, which is to transition on purpose, take like 5 minutes between things and just go, okay, what did I accomplish? Now what am I stepping into? But that little act right there, transition on purpose is incredible for your brain. All right. Last part for this section, because I'm just going to give you five here, is to quit at about 80%. Now, if you're an entrepreneur listening to me, or you have a really busy, chaotic job, or maybe it's super physically demanding, then you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say end your day still having gas in the tank. Because most of us, what do? We get across the finish line of the day and we're just like crawling to dinner or our bed and just kind of giving our families and our loved ones what's left of us at the end of the day. And then the thought of getting up early the next day to have a quiet time or something like that can be really difficult to even wrap your mind around, let alone do. And so it's great for us to go into the day with the mentality that we're going to enter a day with gas in the tank. We're not going to completely drain ourselves and just crawl across the finish line. Now, that may not just be physical energy. The truth is we give ourselves so much to our day that we just give every ounce of energy mentally to our day. And then when we get home, we're mentally fatigued and drained. But I'm telling you, if you put a lot of these strategies and others that you could study in place, then you'll cross the finish line with mental gas in the tank, if you will, as well. Super important from the top. Task switching, time blocking, time batching, transition with purpose, and end your day still having gas in the tank so that you're not so drained that all you have left is distraction and no time to implement what you're learning and how you're growing in your personal growth and your spiritual development. So, this next piece of the podcast is about refueling on purpose. Okay. This is something we have to think about. And I don't know why we don't give it more time and thought in our day. We just sort of imagine that we will refuel like magic. I guess we go to sleep and we just wake up with energy, burnout doesn't happen. Like in society, we actually see this burnout culture, we see the burnout cycle, and we see people doing things like just living for the weekend or living for that vacation that may or may not happen years from now. We don't want to do that. As high performers, as seriously growth minded people and Christians, we want to have a regular practice of refueling ourselves and staying high level energy all the time. And that, whatever that means for you, high level energy. I'm not talking about like screaming and dancing and, all that. I'm just talking about performing at a high level and being excited about what we're doing. So it's really important that we do things that fill our tank. Now, for me, one of the ways this happened in my life is years ago, somebody told me, Mark, you're burned out. You're not being super productive. You have diminishing returns. You should go on a solo trip. You should just get away from the family, get away from work, get away from everything you regularly do, and just go change pace. Just get into some solitude and change pace. And it took me years to do this, to actually do it because it felt selfish leaving everything behind. But I did it. I finally did it and I went out and it was the best thing I had done for my development, for my growth, and for all of the people I serve on a regular basis was to push the pause button on productivity and growth and go out and just do something wildly different. I had a blast. That's not really the point. The point is that I discovered what people had been trying to tell me was true, that if I was to pause and have fun and focus on doing things that I love, then when I come back to work, I'm faster, I'm more efficient, I'm more clear, and I'm better able to serve people and love people. Completely blew my mind. And so it started me going down this path of reorienting myself toward refueling daily, weekly, monthly. And so this is a really important thing, and it looks different for all of us. And the question to answer so that you can get to your version of refueling is, what gives you energy? What gives you energy? Some people are incredibly energized in social settings. And so perhaps your thing would be to have a regular practice of hanging out with your friends, your peers, or going out and doing fun things together. Other people are completely energized by solitude. So you would have a regular practice of getting out by yourself, like me on these solo trips. Maybe it's to read a book or to pray or to just simply do nothing and hit the reset button. You could also paint this as your hobbies. The easiest way for me to explain this is that we want to purposefully have adventure in our life, and then you get to define adventure. So it could be going on trips like me. It could be going out with your friends, or it could be leaning into whatever your hobby is: weightlifting, playing music, reading books, just things that refill your energy. Now, once you nail down what that is for you, it's important to go ahead and put some of our high performer tactics from earlier in place. We're going to get on our calendar. We're going to block time for these things. Currently on my calendar, it says gym when it's time to go to the gym. Now, that might sound super simple, but if it's not on the calendar, I won't do it. And the same is true for most of you. It's important to block these things into your calendar and protect those time blocks, because if you're purposefully refueling your tank, that means you're going to have more energy to serve people, more energy to grow yourself. You're not going to skip those quiet times. You're going to put in the reps. It's incredibly good for us to slow down, hit the pause button, and do something fun or adventurous so that we have more momentum when it's time to be productive. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A cheerful heart is good medicine." And this is how we lean into that verse, is by doing things that fill us up, cause us to have a cheerful heart. All right, let's jump into point number 3 today. This one is going to be a very deeply important one. So dive into this with me. And it is the idea of practicing Sabbath rhythms and solitude. Now, this is something a little bit different than the adventurous, fill yourself up type of solitude. This is something a little more focused than that. So Jesus had a practice of finding lonely places so that he could connect with the Father. He had a practice of prayer, he had a practice of connection with the Father, and he did that by resting and finding solitude. And even if we go all the way back to Genesis and we look at the first 6 days of creation and then on the 7th day God rested, we all can conclude that God was not necessarily tired. He wasn't necessarily resting for himself, but perhaps was modeling a rhythm for us. It is incredibly important for us to have a Sabbath rest in our life. Now, I'm not going to get into the theology of is it required, is it not required. You can actually study that for yourself in your Bible and come to a conclusion on that on your own. And I'd encourage you to do that if you have a question about it. But what you cannot do is deny the benefit of having a single day per week where you just don't work, but you refill, you rest, and you connect with God. It's incredibly valuable to hit that pause button on a weekly basis and to have a rhythm to your productivity, a rhythm to your energy creation, and a rhythm to your connection with the Lord. Now, solitude is something I want to hit really quick. Solitude is different than isolation. So if you hear me saying things like solitude and you immediately go to, that sounds terrible, I don't want to do that, it sounds unhealthy, what you're probably thinking is isolation. Jesus did not have a practice of isolating himself. That's not what we learn from Jesus. What we learn from Jesus is that he used solitude to connect with the Lord. Isolation would be its unhealthy counterpart where we are disconnecting from everybody, including the Lord. And so this Sabbath idea, this day of rest and refueling, super important that we have a little bit of solitude in there for connection, not necessarily disconnection. Okay. Now that we've hit that, I want to just tell you like how to go about this. And it's not going to be like step one, two, three, here's how you do a Sabbath. It's more like orient yourself toward the Lord. First, decide that this is going to be a day. It could be Sundays because typically we go to church on Sundays. It could be Saturdays. It could be whatever day you want. But this is going to be a day that we point toward the Lord and say, God, as a way to honor you, with my energy, with my time, and with my resources, I want to make sure that I'm not so burned out that I can't focus on being a productive disciple. I can't focus on being productive at work and honoring you there, and that I'm so drained and distracted that I can't actually pray, read my Bible, study, and grow myself spiritually. Because I care so much about that, I just want to have a day where I think about you, I do things that fill me up, I connect with people I love, and I just interrupt the normal pattern of my life. Now you get to decide how to do that, what day to do that with. So long as you're doing it, you're sort of hitting this checkbox of I'm creating a rhythm for myself. Okay, I shouldn't call it a checkbox. It's more important than that, but you get what I mean. So we've hit three really important things today. One is that we can actually put some strategies and tactics in place so that at the end of the day, we're not so mentally drained, distracted, and just drowning in decision fatigue, and we can actually refuel ourselves on purpose as well. We should be doing that. And then, just as God modeled for us in Genesis and Jesus as well, we have a rhythm to creation, a rhythm to energy recreation. We want to make sure that we're leaning into the idea of having a Sabbath and protecting that time, protecting our mental bandwidth, and having good stewardship over who we are, growing ourselves. All right. So, one quick practical exercise that you can do right after this podcast. On top of all of those things we talked about, you can list out one to two spiritual rhythms that you'd want more time and energy for. You can ask yourself what's robbing your time and energy from those things. And then you can pick just one strategy from this episode that you want to implement this week. Just one. If you did just one, that would move the needle for you. And then track what changes in how you feel, how you pray, how you engage spiritually. Super, super important to track and to think about how things are going. So that's what we have for the podcast today. I'm hoping that you took away several things that you're going to go do and not be a content zombie like me. If you did take something away, share this episode with a friend. subscribe, like, do all the things so that we can grow this channel and help more fully devoted followers of Jesus become growing disciples of Jesus. Until next week, be known.